Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Roofing Contractor, Walls and Ceilings, and Building Enclosure. Art Eisner, the editor, and Rick D'Amato, our editorial director of Roofing Contractor, and I are honored to visit today with Trent Cotney, the CEO of Cotney Construction Law. Welcome, Trent. And as you know, Trent has become the legal voice of the industry, especially since he has offices all over the country and a team of attorneys ready to assist you with anything you need. Well, with that all said, Art, I'd like to bounce it over to you so you can kick us off.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for everybody out there for joining us. Trent, roofing and weather are obviously always related. We're definitely feeling the impact of that. We've got another Hurricane Sally on the approach. What are you hearing from some contractors, I guess, in the mix? And what do you expect to add? What are you expecting to happen?
Sure. Jill, Rick, Art, it's good seeing you guys again. I want to welcome everybody out there. We have been in touch with a lot of our contractor customers in Louisiana, Southern Texas, and Mississippi. The storm, what's interesting about this storm is that it's very slow. And oftentimes it's not the wind speed is obviously an issue, but a bigger concern is flooding and obviously storm surge. Okay, so last I heard it was going about 2-3 miles an hour. It'll probably speed up a little bit as it moves inward, but my concern is flooding. And I think one of the big concerns that I heard from contractors that were already out there, and that's the key that I want to put out. There was a lot of contractors that are already mobilized, was already doing work from the previous hurricane, right? They're having a difficult time because they don't have any place to store their equipment and materials. And one of the things that I like to really, tell the contractors out there is when you are creating a crisis management plan that deals with this kind of thing, you need to have those relationships with contractors and suppliers that are outside your immediate geographic region so that you can use them to mobilize in the event that something like this happens. I don't think anybody that had gone out there to work for the previous storm anticipated that another one would be so close on top of the first one. And it's a little bit removed over, but there's still going to be a significant amount of rain that's going to come through. So the biggest concerns I've heard right now is just the ability to continue to do work and to mobilize, and the concern that they have with a lot of the materials and equipment that they have in place already, and what the storm impact is going to be on that, regardless of whether it's wind or water.
Got it. So, and you touched on one of the points I wanted to hit, that obviously this area was just affected by a major storm, and you think that the biggest concerns are related to what may happen with the storm surge supply and the current supply. What about getting additional supplies into those areas, though, concerning what damage may come? How concerned are contractors about that?
It's difficult. There's a lot of work that is being done right now. So it's already putting some strain on supply chains in the immediate vicinity. And kind of like what we talked about last time, as the local suppliers start to run out of stuff, they're going to start sourcing from other areas. And eventually what happens is you've got sort of a trickle-down effect where you start affecting supply chains in areas that weren't immediately affected. Key critical components are obviously fasteners, decking, tarps, shingles, the basic stuff. The more complex items, those tend to be available just because they're not as big a demand. But yeah, definitely plywood, and I would say plywood, tarps, and fasteners are at the top of the list.
I know obviously you're a big fan of preparation, and that you've been encouraging contractors to be prepared, or perhaps even stockpile for some of these events. Is part of that happening right now? Is that part of the strain? Some of these ghost purchases, if you will, purchasing supplies in anticipation?
Yeah, I think a lot of contractors are starting to do that, and I've had very frank discussions with my friends and customers here in Florida. And, we're all putting money down that we're going to get a 4 or 5 by the time this thing is done. It's 2020, right? I'd be surprised if we don't get a 4 or 5. And if that's the case, then I think a lot of contractors, especially residential, are preparing. They don't want to be in short supply. One of the biggest things that I hit home is just making sure that those lines of communication remain open. It's very difficult to communicate with your crew, with your home office, in the event that your main office is right within the zone itself. But this is the critical time for any roofing contractor, because you want the ability to not only help your employees and help your family, but to make sure that you are out doing business and earning money at the same time. So getting that supply chain together, making sure that you've got that, as well as the logistics of communication, is paramount for anybody in the Gulf area at this point.
I think that there's kind of a conventional wisdom out there that if there are supply chain problems, why don't the manufacturers just step up and start producing more if there is going to be a demand, or can they kind of forecast or foresee the potential of that happening like you've talked about? What are the pratfalls? Why isn't it just as easy as doing that?
Well, one is it takes time. Okay, it takes the ramp down effect. It's taken, let's see, they started in April, and we're just now seeing its effect. So if they were to turn on the switch right now, it would be a while before that happens. But I think, I can't speak for manufacturers out there, but I'm assuming that they probably aren't going to turn it back on because they are concerned about overall decreased demand because of COVID-19. I know in particular, commercial's been hit to the tune of about 10 to 15%. Residential at some point is also going to get hit. Okay, right now it still remains strong. There's still a lot of work to be done. But as we start getting further and further out and all those extra checks and things start running out, I think it's going to start hitting residential some more as well.
Got it. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your most recent piece on roofingcontractor.com, talking about liability in construction and overall roofing industry during the pandemic. What are some of the key takeaways from that piece?
So what I wanted to focus on was just, we've got a ton of questions from all over the U.S. about legal liability shields and the ability to protect yourself against the unintentional exposure of COVID-19. And it's something, you know, I recently had the privilege to speak to the Roofing Coalition, and one of their big concerns was liability. You know, how does this work? What do you do? You know, what can we do to protect ourselves? And the federal government has talked about it plenty of times. It's been in a variety of stimulus plans, you know, primarily the Republican stimulus plans, but nothing has been enacted yet on a federal level. On the state level, a lot of states have already pushed through some really great plans. You know, for example, you know, Rick, I know you're in Georgia now. I really like their COVID-19 legal liability shield. What it does, just to give you an idea, is it places the burden on, you know, a consumer that's coming into a shop. What you can do is you can put a notice on that shop and just say, hey, we can't necessarily prevent COVID-19. You understand that if you're going to come in here, you might get it, and we're putting you on notice of that. To me, that seems fair, right? And that's the kind of thing I like. It doesn't say, hey, you can't make a workers' comp claim. Okay, it doesn't touch that. It doesn't touch intentional exposure. So if I have COVID-19 and I cough on somebody, it doesn't touch that. But I like the mindset there. And what's really interesting, Art, is this kind of falls along political lines as well. California has come out so far and say, no, you know, we're doing everything we can to protect consumers. So I don't know. I don't think you're going to see necessarily something universal unless there is some, you know, more action on the federal level.
And so are there some, if there are some actionable steps for contractors that obviously read the piece, what would you where would you encourage them to start?
I think contractually, there's some stuff that you can do in there. And I recommend, you know, if you've got an existing contract, you can make a rider or an addendum. If you've got a new contract, consider putting some language in there that waives or releases liability for the potential, you know, exposure to COVID-19 or transmission of it. Obviously, again, unintentional. You know, we're not talking about intentionally doing anything. A great way for the listeners to sell this is make it mutual. Okay, make it mutual. If you have a customer, let's say you're working on a residential project, right? And that customer needs to be as concerned about your crew coming after her or him as you do having the customers come after you. So it's very easy to make these provisions mutual and say, okay, we mutually release each other from unintentional exposure to COVID-19. There's a variety of different ways to cut against it. But my advice, Art, is don't wait for your local legislator to get everything together. go ahead and start getting in your contracts now. Worst case scenario is they enact a law and you've got a provision that doesn't necessarily need to be in there, but I'd rather have that than not.
Got it. Great advice. Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Art. And Trent, thanks for being here with us this morning. We really appreciate it. This afternoon. Trent, I'm curious to know or have your thoughts on the PPP forgiveness application process. We're hearing some things where some of the banks are actually kind of holding back, waiting for some more guidance from the feds. What are you hearing about that?
So, Rick, that's a great question. I have heard that, and the banks, similar to the same problems that we experienced as an industry the first go around, the banks are having, the same kind of issues. If you remember, there was a big hullabaloo at the beginning where a lot of the banks weren't processing the stuff like they should. I think right now the burden, the onus on forgiveness is primarily on the banks to get the paperwork together and to get everything submitted correctly. So getting that process together, making sure that they're looking at everything and doing it in a fashion to comply with both the Department of Treasury and the SBA is taking time. A lot of the reports that we've heard from contractors that are anxious to know about that forgiveness, because remember, we talked about it last time, there's some potential big tax liability there, right? You need to know it now before the end of the year. You don't want to wait till December to figure out what your tax liability is if for some reason you can't take those expenses as deductions, okay? Obviously there may be changes, but what we've heard from the big banks is, it's a difficult process. They are getting communications out, but we haven't heard a lot of, forgiveness options being done just yet. Maybe some of the smaller banks. I haven't heard of a single big bank yet doing one. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but the word we're hearing out is frustration. And I think that's going to continue through the end of the year.
Well, we'll obviously keep that on in our ongoing discussions in the coming weeks. We'll learn more, I'm sure. Well, what else is on your mind? What are contractors calling you about this week?
So, Rick, something interesting that has come up, and I'm always looking for potential liability. That's kind of my job. I've been trained to do that, and I got to make sure that contractors are protected. And one of the things that was really interesting, and I try to watch any of the government regulatory messaging that comes out, because what that does is it foreshadows what's to come. Rarely does the government just say, aha, okay. Usually if you look close enough, there is some news out there that suggests where they're going. So what was interesting is the Department of Justice came out and they said they were very concerned about antitrust, anti-competitive actions among businesses that involves discussing limiting benefits or what to do about wages or how to navigate PPP funds or anything along those lines. So my advice to the contractors that are out there is when you're having discussions, especially if it's in a group, okay? And I know, I've got an association meeting tomorrow. The first thing out of my mouth will be, this is governed by the antitrust policy. And a lot of people roll their eyes and go, it's that lawyer again. There's a reason why we say that stuff, right? Because if you are in a group and you've got someone that it feels like they are not part of that group or they're being isolated, that's how these problems happen. And my advice to anybody is be very, very careful about talking about wages, talking about benefits, talking about how you are doing what you are doing and getting others, your competition, to agree with that, okay? That's what the Department of Justice said. We are actively going to be looking for this. And we've already seen, based on past press releases, the roofing industry, unfortunately, is replete with opportunities for the Department of Justice to come in. So my recommendation is, if you're in peer groups, if you are involved in any kind of industry communications, be very, very careful about anything dealing with wages, how you're dealing with PPP loans and benefits, okay? Because they're going to be laser focused on this kind of stuff for the months to come.
Thanks, Trent. We always appreciate you taking the time to inform and advise our contractor viewers and readers. So, Jill, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Sounds great. Yes. Well, thank you, Trent, so much for your time. We always appreciate you giving us some great insight for the week. Thank you to everybody out there who's watching. We hope everybody's staying safe and healthy. If you need to reach us, please make sure to go to roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com. And while you're there, click on the subscribe button. And make sure you sign up for our free digital edition and our free e-newsletter so you're always up to date as to when we're doing all these great interviews with Trent and others. So please, everyone stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Hey!